In our time remaining here, what I'd like to do is show you really from start to finish how easy it is to set up and configure and display data in the Canary system. So I'm going to wear two different hats to kind of go through that. First, what I'll do is I'm going to put on the hat of a system administrator, and from there, then configure the system, and then come back and build a screen in Axiom similar to what you're looking at here. So just to walk back to the very beginning, when a customer, when they maybe want to try out our system or purchase it, they'll get a link, just like you see here on my screen, to download the installer for our most recent version. And when they download that, they'll have a installer that you'll see just like this on my screen here, and they'll be able to select what components of the software they'd like to install and simply click install, and it just takes a couple minutes to run through that installation. So installing it is very easy. And then from the configuration side, this is the Canary administrator tool, and all of these different blue tiles you see are all clickable, and they expand into different administrative areas of the system. So it'd be as simple as once we install it, the customer would get a serial number from us. They would just fill out the form here to license through the internet, select the products. There's a button they would say, click to get licensed, and then they'll be licensed just like this machine is that I'm using right now. So at this point, we'd be up and running with the software that quickly and easily. So now that I have a licensed product, I can begin to configure a logging session to get data from, in this case, an OPC UA source into the Canary historian. So with the historian itself, I'll go into the historian administrative section here. These are all different data sets, which are nothing more than similar groupings or groupings of similar tags, maybe for a piece of equipment or a location, for example. I'm going to create one to begin with here just for today's demonstration. Call this Thursday demo. And I'd also like to have an email sent to me if this data set is not getting data within 5 minutes. That way, this site maybe is at a location where we don't have anyone at the moment. And if there's a problem, I can know right away that we're not getting data instead of days or even weeks later when we discover that there was an outage. So from here, now that I've created my data set, we'll go ahead and configure a logging session. So the first thing I'll need to do is I'll need to determine where I'm going to send the data to from the OPC source. So in my settings area, I can pick the historian, which I'm going to just send it to the local machine I'm on right now. And then I can pick the data set on that machine, which I just created. And now I need to connect to the actual device. So I'll go to the OPC server, and I'll either need to put in the host name or the URL, which I happen to have a machine to connect to. And then I can select the port number that we're going to open up. So now I've made that connection, so I can go ahead and browse that device. And I can see all the different nodes. So I'll go ahead and select this node. So these are all the tags within that node. I'm just going to select all of these tags here. So now I've created my tag list. So these are the tags that I'm going to log data from into the historian. Now I can add some extra columns here, what we might call metadata properties, if I would like to define more properties. Now there are some extra ones that are already pre-set in the system that I can add, such as maybe a description and maybe engineering units, but I can also add my own custom metadata fields. So let's say, for example, I want to just track location as well. So I've added those extra columns. Now if I select any tag on my list here, we can see under the settings for the tag, I have my extra metadata property fields that I just added. I'll just go ahead, since I selected kilowatts, we'll just say KW here for the engineering units, and I'll go ahead and apply that change. So at this point, I've configured my tag list. So this is the tags that I'm going to be storing all the data for in the historian. So if I go back to my main page here for my OPC collector, I'll see here's the session I've created. And I can just hit the play button to start streaming data into the historian. So if I just want to, do a final check, I can go into my historian again. Now I have a new data set right here called Thursday Demo, and I can see I have 45 tags, and we're getting live updates into that data set. And I can drill down in, and every day at midnight we roll over to a new file. So obviously I just created this, so here's our first file, and I can drill down into that file, and I can see all 45 of those tags that we selected to log data to. If I highlight any one of these tags, I can now see that we actually are getting live data. As Kyle mentioned, we store the data as a timestamp, a value, and a quality, TVQ for short. So I can see I have my live data now. So really at this point, my job as an administrator is complete. I've installed the software, I've licensed it, I've configured data into a data set within the historian. So now I can switch over and perform duties from an end user perspective. So I'm going to go back to my Axiom screen here. So what I'd like to do now is build something similar to this. In this case, what you're looking at now is a live report of many different pumps in a facility and live trending, and I can see individual flow rates, for example, on each pump in the facility. So I'm just going to go to my main menu here in Axiom, and we'll just create a brand new application. So what I want to start with is deciding, number one, who will be looking or utilizing this Axiom application I'm about to build. What device will they be looking at? Because we need to determine, the screen size. So by default, this shows 768 by 1024. So I'll just design this for the size of the screen I'm using right now. I'll just kind of manually drag this across here, and I can see how the height and width and number of pixels have updated. But this could be maybe even an iPhone that I know, different operators, when they're not at their station, they just want to pull up a simple application that has a couple gauges on it to show them some live data. Then I'd want to make sure I had the right pixel resolution designed for that type of application. So what I'm going to do next is just to start to design my screen, I can start to drag and drop in different controls on my screen. So let's begin with a trend graph to start with. So the trend graph is our trending tool. And I'm going to make this a little bigger temporarily here, just so you can see things better before we use a different control. So I'll start by adding some trends. So we can, first of all, see on the left here, these are the different branches of data that I can choose from. So for example, the very first option is my Canary historian. This is the actual data historian itself. Kyle had mentioned a good bit about the different ways we can create views and utilize them. So these next two are actually views, those filters over top of the raw data. But I just want to expand my historian, and these are all the different data sets we were just looking at just a minute ago. And here's my Thursday demo data set. So if I select that, here's all 45 of those tags. So just as an example, I can either do a keyword search. Maybe I want to look for anything that has, alarm in the name. It'll drill down and I can find those tags, for example. But I'm just going to, quickly select the first 4 tags on the list, and I'm just going to add those to the chart. So here you can see now I have live data here coming in on the right-hand edge of my chart here. Obviously, I just started logging data from these tags to the historian, so I don't have a lot of history here. So what I'm actually going to do is I'll pick a few tags that I have some good history on here, just to use a better example. So I'm going to just remove all those tags and go back and select some tags we have data on. So what I'd like to do is use one of my virtual views. And here I have 3 different facilities, and under facility 1, I have 10 different pumps. So maybe I just want to compare some different flow rates between my pumps. So I could actually just do a search here. I'll just type in flow. So here's all the flow tags for the 10 different pumps at facility 1. So I'll just go ahead here and select, I'll just pick the first 4 flow tags here. So now I have, live data trending. I'm looking at 1 hour of data right now. So I could expand out and see larger amounts of data, or I could change. Maybe I want to just see 10 minutes of data on my screen here. It's very easy to adjust the amount of time we're looking at. Maybe I want to go back even and look at data from Monday at 12 a.m. and apply that. So now I've went back to November 9th at 12 a.m. and I'm looking at the data at that point in time. I'm just going to go back to the live time here. And if I pause my screen here for a second, maybe I know there was an issue here, kind of flatlined a little bit. We didn't see any changes, and I knew there was an issue, and we actually had maintenance look at that. And here what it was there was a problem with the sensor. They recalibrated it, let's say. So I can actually just come in and even put an annotation on the trend right here. We'll just say we recalibrated the sensor. And that'll store in the historian. Anybody in the future that pulls in this trend onto their chart, if they go to that point in time, they'll be able to come in and see exactly what the note was, the user that applied that note. From a different user, they would have different options here. They could actually add another note to this if there was an ongoing maintenance log that needed accounted for. So that's how you can handle annotations very easily. Some other things here, just put this back into regular cursor mode and go back to live time here. Let's say I'm looking at larger amount of data. I'll just say 2 hours here. Okay, and I'm looking at my chart. I'm going to pause it here, and I want to zoom in on an area of this this trend chart. I can change my cursor mode. We can zoom in there, so I can just highlight, and it'll zoom right in. So again, if I want to zoom in closer, I can highlight that again, so you can see how I'm down to about 5 minutes of data here right now. And I can undo my zoom here if I'd like. So it's really easy to navigate through a trend chart. A couple other things here real quick before we move into a couple other things. If I just wanted to maybe compare my flow on this pump with the one right below it, I could even drag it down and overlay it real quick just to do a quick comparison. I can always put it back into auto band mode. Or maybe I want to link it together permanently. I can just select one trend on the scale and click on another link here. And now I have both of those sharing the same axis now. So really easy to do some quick comparisons. I can undo that change. Maybe I'd like to see how this pump here with the yellow trend was performing now versus 30 days ago. Well, I could actually just go back in and pick that same pump again. And I can go into where we edit trends. I'll just kind of put these beside each other here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to rename this one. I'll call this flow, and we'll use the same name as the one above it. And I'll just call this 30-day, because what we want to do is we want to time shift this trend back 30 days. And I can go to where we time shift, just put in 30 days. And actually, I didn't have data back then, so we'll just shift this back 2 days ago. Okay. And then I can band both of these trends together now. So this is the exact same trend. The yellow trend is the live data. And then 2 days ago, we can see that this flow rate was much higher. So I know maybe right now, if this was the standard flow rate, I know there's a problem right now with this particular pump. So this is just how you can do some real quick analysis. Maybe I just want to be aware if one of my pumps is running above or getting close to a certain threshold. We can do different limits. For example, on this pump, I could say, hey, you know what, I want to know when I'm reaching a high limit. Let's say when it's getting close to let's say 65, then I can put in a limit line. And I can say a dashed line. So you can see right now behind me already, there's my limit line. But if I want to further bring some more context to when we're above that threshold, I could add a high limit. So when we're at 65, I want the trend itself to change color and fill in any area above the line. So now you can see how that looks. So if I'm looking at this, we'll just go back to 30 minutes of real-time data. So as I'm trending my real-time data now, the current 30 minutes, we're not quite above it. But, if we go back, a little bit further in time, we can see where, in this case, where we were above that threshold. One other thing before I go into my next control I want to talk about. Let's just say we wanted to do more of an average on our trend chart between tags, for example. So let's say I would like to create an on-the-fly average trend. I can come back to where we edit tags, and there's a trend calculator tool here. I'm going to get rid of this one here for the moment. So I just want to get an average of these 4 trends. So I'm just going to call this flow average. And in my equation field, I can simply come in and start my equation. I can say, hey, let's add this flow to that one, and then divide these by 4. So I just made a very quick average calculation. So we can see it added the new calculation tag. So at the bottom now, I have the average of the 4 different trends, on the same chart here now. So there's a lot we can do and with the trends itself, but I just wanted to at least create some type of a trend chart for you. I'm going to go ahead and resize this and position it somewhere else on my application. Now what I want to do is add a grid control. And we're going to make this maybe the width of my screen here. Get this moved down here a little bit. Okay, so with the grid control, what I want to first of all do is go into the properties. I'm going to make this 6 columns here for the moment. And I want to start adding controls into the grid. So what I want to do here is I would like to do a comparison between 6 different pumps. I want to look at the average flow rate of those pumps over the past week, for example. So I could create a very simple report using a grid control to do that. I'm going to add a label control here for my column headers. Just do a quick property cleanup here. We're going to make the label large. Center that. We'll call this pump 1 flow. So I'm going to copy that for 1 second here. So I'm going to go ahead now and just add the labels across the top here and then give them each an individual name. And now we'll have pump 5 and then finally pump 6. Okay, so I took care of a little clerical work. Now we'll get into some more exciting things. What I want to do next is add in a donut gauge control to my next row. So with the donut gauge control, it's going to ask me to go ahead and assign a tag to it. So we'll just take the very first pump flow tag. Okay. And what I can do here is within the properties of this donut gauge, I'm going to adjust a couple things. First of all, I know my maximum scale needs to be a little higher. Okay. And then I'm going to adjust kind of the height and the width of my gauge here, so it takes up more space. Now, what I want to do next is I would like to know just visually, how close am I getting to some type of an alarm limit, for example. What I can do here is I can actually set different limits. I know that, let's say if my gauge or my flow gets above a rate of 99, so let's say if it's greater than or equal to 99, I would like the color to scale to be red. Okay, and then I can add another limit. We'll say if it's less than 99, I would like the color to be more of a gray color here. And then finally, if the limit would happen to be, let's say, less than 96, I want it to be more of a blue color here. Now, what I like to do is I think this is probably too much color on a gauge. I just like to make the limits invisible, because what it does then is it just applies the color of the limit to the actual gauge itself. So it makes it a lot easier to understand by just a quick glance if something's in an alarm stage, for example. But what I want to do now is I'm looking at the live data. I'm really interested in looking back. I want to look at the data on a 7-day interval, and I want to see across 7 days what was the average reading for that 7-day period. So these are all our different aggregates. I'm going to pick the time average aggregate. And then I want to actually adjust the start date. I want to say, hey, you know what, let's go now, but let's move back 1 week ago. So last Sunday, starting that week, I'm looking at what the average was. So I can see, it was above 99. That could be a problem. But what I'm going to do now is that I've defined all the roles for that one gauge. I can just copy them across here real quick. And then all I have to do for each pump or for each gauge is just assign the new pump flow tag corresponding to that pump. So you can see the next pump, it averaged 93. It was a little bit under a desired flow rate in that case for last week. So I'll just do the rest here. So I've created my report that easy. So I can see last week, pump 5 was really good. 2 and 6 were too low, and then 1, 3, and 4 were too high. So now that I've created that report, what I'd also like to do is I want to create more of a dynamic report where I can look at the live data and run some analysis on that. So the other nice thing about a grid control, for example, I'm going to drag another one in here. We'll just kind of expand this out here a little bit. I first want to go into the properties of my grid control. And what I want to do here is I'm just actually going to use 2 columns for this one. And I want to assign the grid to an asset, to a virtual view. So here's the virtual view, and then I want to look at my pumps. So immediately it's going to recognize, since I've assigned the grid to an asset model, it knows that here's all my different pumps. I actually have 30 of them. So I can kind of scroll down, through here and see all the different pumps. So it saves me a lot of time trying to create 30 different rows and manually putting in labels. It did it for me automatically. And now all I want to do next is add one more control here. And we're going to use the value box control. And again, it's going to say, hey, which of the 3 pump tags do I want to look at? I'm going to add the flow. So here I have live data now. I'm going to actually put this application into live mode here real quick. And I can actually, on the fly, I can see, maybe I want to filter this by pumps that are, running too high of a flow rate right now. I could just, simply say, hey, I want to do a sort by, and then I want to put in the name of the tag I want to focus on. And I want to say descending. So what I did was I rearranged all 30 of my pumps. The ones with the highest flow rates are at the top, and then I can scroll down through and look at each one going in a descending value. But what I really want to do is I don't really want to see all 30 maybe. I just want to say, hey, you know what? I want to just take that flow tag, and I want to see only the pumps that have a flow rate greater than 115. And I keep my same descending sort order. So here we go. So now it went from 30 to 9. So I can actually, when I go in, what I can do now is if I'm done with this report, I can save it. I can save it either, publicly for anybody in the organization, maybe just for me only when I sign in, or as an administrator, I can create this so anybody can see, but they can't make changes to it. I'm just going to save it privately, and we'll call this pump flow report and save that. So I've saved my report, and maybe I want to do one other modification here on this grid report. I'll go back to the properties, and what I'd like to have it do is automatically refresh every 2 minutes. So that way, when I'm actually looking at the report, I don't have to manually refresh it every time. I can just know that every 2 minutes I'll get the order refreshed for me. Now, finally here in our remaining time, I'm going to go ahead. I just made one change there, so I'm going to save that report. Okay. But what I'd like to do is I want this report to actually be automated, that every day in the morning, I have this report, a screen capture of this report in my email. I can come into the main menu and go into reports, and let's go ahead and schedule a report. So I can say, hey, here's the report that I want to schedule. And I would like to schedule it maybe weekly or monthly. There's some advanced settings, or even when an event completes. Kyle had mentioned we have our event tracking module, and so what we could say is, if there was a particular event I created, like a high flow rate, anytime a pump gets above 115, for example, it'll create an event, which when the event completes, it'll actually email the appropriate people the report on that event. But I'm just going to create a basic weekly report that'll run maybe every day of the week, or let's say just Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, for example. I want this report to be generated and emailed, let's say at, I don't know, 5 a.m. And I want it to go to this particular person or people, like engineering at canarylabs.com. So then the engineering group would get this, and we can include that as an attachment. So now I've created my report. So at this point, my life as an admin and an end user today is my roles are done. I've done what I needed to do. So I think what I'll do next is switch back over to Kyle. I know he has a few things as we finish up.